Through my own eyes, March 15th, 2019. Code blue. The words echoed through the sterile hospital corridors as my heart monitor flatlined. I remember that moment with crystal clarity, the sharp smell of antiseptic, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and my husband Danny's face, twisted with fear as he was pushed into the corner by the rushing medical team. Starting chest compressions, a nurse's voice cut through the chaos, blood pressures dropping fast. I could see everything: the determined faces of the nurses, the rhythmic movements of CPR, Danny's trembling hands clasped in prayer. My daughter Sarah, a doctor herself, was just 3 floors above, unaware that her mother's life was slipping away while she fought to save a 3-year-old boy from a car accident. "God, please," Danny whispered, his pastor's collar damp with tears. "Not yet, not today." That's when time seemed to stop. The medical team's movements slowed, and a profound silence descended upon the room. In that suspended moment, memories flooded through my mind: the day I lost my baby boy at 5.5 months pregnant, the countless patients I'd nursed back to health over my 30-year career, Danny's unwavering support through every trial, and Sarah's graduation from medical school. The air changed. The harsh hospital smells faded, replaced by the sweetest fragrance I'd ever encountered, like 1,000 blooming flowers after spring rain. A warmth spread through me, different from anything earthly. The ceiling seemed to dissolve, and a soft, golden light filled my vision. "Time of death," I heard someone begin to say, but their voice seemed distant now. I wasn't afraid. For the first time in my life, I felt complete peace. The monitoring equipment's frantic beeping faded away, replaced by the faintest whisper of music, not from any earthly instrument, but something more divine. Danny's voice broke through one last time: "Charlotte, my love, stay with us." But I was already floating upward, drawn by an irresistible force toward that golden light. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was leaving my earthly body behind. This wasn't the end, it was a beginning. My story, the real story, was about to unfold in ways I never could have imagined. The last thing I saw before everything changed was the clock on the wall, 3:33 p.m., exactly 48 years to the day since I lost my unborn son. This couldn't be a coincidence. As consciousness slipped away, I heard a voice, clear as crystal, speaking words that would change everything: "Daughter, come home." What happened in the next 11 minutes would shake the foundations of everything I believed about life, death, and the eternal love that bridges both worlds. Experience more life-changing stories of hope and divine encounters. Join our journey of faith by subscribing, where miracles become reality. Looking back, my life has been a tapestry of service, faith, and divine purpose. For 30 years, I served as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Nashville, Tennessee, where every day brought new challenges and miracles. My hands have helped deliver countless babies, comforted the dying, and brought healing to the sick. It's a calling that chose me as much as I chose it. I met Danny, my husband, during my first year as a nurse. He was a young pastor visiting a dying congregation member, and our paths crossed in the ICU. His unwavering faith and gentle spirit drew me in immediately. Even in the face of death, he brought hope to his flock. We married 6 months later in his small church, surrounded by both our hospital and church families. Our early years were blessed with joy and purpose. Danny's ministry grew, and I continued my nursing career, our lives intertwining in service to others. But God had other plans for testing our faith. In 1971, during my first pregnancy, we lost our baby boy at 5.5 months. The doctors called it a medical complication, but for us it was the deepest valley of our faith journey. I can still remember holding that tiny, perfect form in my arms, counting his fingers and toes, wondering why God would give and take away so quickly. That loss shaped us profoundly. Danny's sermons became more compassionate, touching on grief and healing in ways that resonated deeply with our congregation. My approach to nursing changed too. I developed a special connection with mothers in the maternity ward, especially those dealing with loss. Our shared pain became a bridge of understanding and comfort. 2 years later, God blessed us with our daughter Sarah. From the moment she was born, we could see a special purpose in her life. She had my nurturing spirit and Danny's unwavering faith, combined with a brilliant mind that would later drive her to become an emergency room doctor. Watching her grow, Seeing her inherit both our callings, Danny's ministry of comfort and my ministry of healing, felt like God's way of showing us His perfect plan. Our faith journey wasn't always smooth. We weathered storms together, the church split that tested Danny's leadership, the night I was attacked in the hospital parking lot by a desperate drug addict, the years of doubt when prayers seemed to go unanswered. But through it all, our foundation remained strong. Every Sunday I sat in the front pew, watching my husband preach about a God who works all things together for good, and every day I saw that truth played out in my work at the hospital. Recent years brought new challenges. My blood pressure began causing concerns, and arthritis started making long nursing shifts more difficult. But I refused to retire. There were still too many people who needed care, too many hands to hold, too many prayers to whisper at bedsides. Danny supported my decision, though I could see the worry in his eyes whenever I came home exhausted. Our church community became an extended family over the years. Every Wednesday night we hosted Bible study in our home, our living room filled with people seeking answers, comfort, and connection. These gatherings became a lifeline for many, a place where doubts could be expressed, fears confronted, and faith strengthened. Through it all, I never forgot our angel baby. Every year on March 15th, Danny and I would visit the small memorial garden behind the church where we placed a tiny headstone. We named him Matthew, Gift of God, because even in our loss, we recognized him as a precious gift who changed our lives forever. I didn't know then that God would use every thread of my life, the nursing career, the loss of Matthew, our family's faith journey, even my health struggles, to prepare me for what was about to happen. On another March 15th, 48 years after we lost Matthew, God would show me exactly why everything had happened the way it did. He would reveal a divine tapestry so beautiful, so perfect in its design, that it would change not only my life but the lives of countless others who would hear my story. Looking back now, I can see how every moment was preparation. Every tear, every joy, every doubt, and every triumph was leading to an 11-minute journey that would transform everything I thought I knew about life, death, and God's eternal love. Our family life revolved around a delicate balance of faith, medicine, and deep-rooted connections. Every Sunday morning began the same way. Danny would rise before dawn to prepare his sermon while I made his favorite blueberry pancakes, a tradition that started during our first year of marriage. Sarah, when she wasn't on call at the hospital, would join us for church service and our traditional Sunday family lunch. Sarah grew into an extraordinary woman, though watching her push herself to exhaustion in the year often reminded me of my younger self. At 38, she had already become one of the most respected emergency physicians at Nashville General Hospital. Like me, she had an uncanny ability to remain calm in chaos, a gift that served her well in the ER. But unlike me, she carried the weight of making split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. Our weekly family gatherings became sacred time. Every Thursday evening, unless there was an emergency, Sarah would come home for dinner. Danny would pray over the meal, his voice carrying the same powerful gentleness that first drew me to him decades ago. These dinners were more than just meals, they were our family's anchor, a time when the weight of our callings could be shared and lightened. The church community had become our extended family over the years. Our congregation at Hope Valley Christian Church wasn't the largest in Nashville, but it was the most tight-knit. Many members had been with us for decades, watching Sarah grow up, supporting us through trials, celebrating our joys. Mrs. Henderson, our oldest member at 92, still brought her famous peach cobbler to every potluck, insisting it was the secret to her longevity. Our home became a sanctuary for those in need. Danny and I hosted a grief support group every Tuesday night, where people shared their stories of loss and healing. My experience losing Matthew and my years as a nurse gave me a unique perspective that helped others navigate their pain. Sarah would sometimes attend these meetings, offering both medical insight and compassion, especially when we counseled parents who had lost children. The intersection of faith and medicine in our family often led to deep discussions. Sarah, with her scientific training, sometimes questioned the more miraculous aspects of faith, while Danny would gently remind her that science and God weren't mutually exclusive. I stood somewhere in the middle, having witnessed both medical miracles and inexplicable divine interventions throughout my nursing career. Recent health challenges had brought our family even closer. When my blood pressure started causing concerns, Sarah became not just my daughter but my medical advocate. She'd call the hospital to check my test results, consult with my doctors, and ensure I was getting the best care possible. Danny, ever the optimist, would say that God was using this to keep our independent daughter connected to her aging parents. Our church's youth group held a special place in my heart. Every Wednesday afternoon before Bible study, I led a mentoring program for teenage girls, many from broken homes. Sarah would occasionally join us, sharing her journey as a female doctor in a male-dominated field, encouraging them to pursue their dreams while keeping their faith strong. These girls became like additional daughters to me, their struggles and triumphs becoming part of our family's story. The bonds within our family grew stronger through each challenge. When Sarah went through a difficult divorce 3 years ago, our home became her refuge. Danny's sermons during that period often touched on God's faithfulness through life's storms, while I spent countless nights sitting with her, remembering how my own mother had comforted me after losing Matthew. Little did we know that all these relationships, all these interconnected lives and shared experiences, were about to play a crucial role in something far bigger than ourselves. God had been weaving a tapestry of connections and preparations, using our family's unique blend of faith and medicine to set the stage for an event that would touch countless lives. As my story would soon reveal, every relationship, every Thursday dinner, every prayer meeting, and every hospital shift was part of His perfect plan, a plan that would unfold in the most unexpected way on that fateful March afternoon. March 15, 2019 began like any other spring morning in Nashville. The dogwoods were blooming outside my bedroom window, and Danny had already left for an early morning prayer meeting. I had my routine cardiology appointment with Dr. Anderson at 10 a.m., nothing unusual, just a regular checkup I'd been doing every 3 months since my blood pressure started acting up. Sarah had called early that morning, apologizing for not being able to accompany me. "Mom, we're short-staffed in the ER today and I can't get away, but please have them send me the results right away." Her voice carried that familiar mix of professional concern and daughterly love. I assured her it was just routine, never suspecting how wrong I was. The waiting room at Nashville Heart Associates was quiet that morning. I sat there filling out the same forms I'd completed countless times, reflecting on how strange it felt to be on this side of healthcare. After 30 years of being the one providing care, becoming the patient had been a humbling transition. I watched other patients, some familiar faces from church, others I'd cared for during my nursing days, all of us waiting for news about our hearts. When the nurse called my name, I noticed her expression change slightly as she took my blood pressure. She tried twice, then called another nurse to verify. I knew that look. I'd worn it myself many times when trying to hide concern from a patient. "Mrs. Holmes, let me get Dr. Anderson right away," she said, her professional calm barely masking her urgency. Dr. Anderson, usually jovial and relaxed, entered the room with a focused intensity I hadn't seen before. "Charlotte, your blood pressure is 234 over 134, he said, getting straight to the point. "This isn't just high, it's critically high. You're at immediate risk for a stroke or heart attack. We need to admit you right now." His words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I thought of Danny, leading his morning Bible study, unaware that his wife's life was suddenly hanging by a thread. I thought of Sarah, busy saving lives in the ER, not knowing her mother might need saving. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone to call Danny. The next few minutes became a blur of activity. Dr. Anderson was already on the phone with the cardiac unit at St. Mary's, my hospital, where I'd spent my career caring for others. "I need a bed immediately," I heard him say. "We have an impending cardiac emergency." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same words I'd spoken so many times as a nurse were now being spoken about me. Danny arrived as they were preparing to transport me, his face ashen but his faith unshaken. "I was in the middle of reading Psalm 23 when you called," he said, taking my hand. "The Lord is our shepherd, Charlotte. He's with us even in this valley." His voice, which had comforted countless parishioners through their trials, now became my anchor. The hospital staff tried to reach Sarah, but the ER was in the middle of a major trauma case, a horrific car accident involving a young family. Later we would understand the divine timing in her inability to answer, but in that moment it felt like one more thread of anxiety in an already unraveling tapestry. As they wheeled me through the familiar corridors of St. Mary's, past rooms where I'd spent countless hours caring for patients, I felt an overwhelming sense of destiny. This wasn't just a medical emergency, there was something more, something I couldn't quite grasp yet. The same halls I'd walked for 30 years as a nurse now looked different from the vantage point of a gurney. The last clear memory I have is of Danny's voice, strong and steady, praying over me as the cardiac team began their work. "Lord, you gave her to me 45 years ago. I trust her to your care now." His words floated around me as the medical team rushed to start emergency protocols. My blood pressure was still climbing and the world was starting to fade around the edges. None of us knew then that this wasn't just a medical crisis, it was the beginning of a journey that would transform not only my life but the lives of countless others. God was about to reveal mysteries that would shake the foundations of everything we thought we knew about faith, life, and the thin veil between heaven and earth. Time seemed to move differently in that hospital room. The cardiac team worked with practiced efficiency, their actions precise yet urgent. I watched the monitors, understanding all too well what each number meant from my years as a nurse. The IV drip they started wasn't bringing my blood pressure down fast enough, and I could feel my body struggling against the mounting crisis. 3 floors above, Sarah was desperately trying to save a 3-year-old boy named Tommy Matthews, thrown from his parents' car in a devastating accident. She had no idea that her own mother lay critical just a few floors below. Later she would tell me that something felt different about that day, a weight in her spirit she couldn't explain as she worked to keep that little boy alive. The room filled with a tense energy as my vital signs continued to deteriorate. Blood pressure still climbing, a nurse called out. 227 over 142, now I could see the concern in their eyes, the same look I'd warned myself so many times when treating critical patients. Dr. Roberts, the attending cardiologist who had been my colleague for 20 years, spoke in hushed tones with Danny in the corner of the room. Danny's faith never wavered, even as the situation grew more dire. Between prayer sessions, he called our church prayer chain. Within minutes, hundreds of people across Nashville were praying for me. Sister Margaret from our Wednesday Bible study gathered people in the hospital chapel. The power of their collective prayers seemed to fill the room with an almost tangible presence. The medical team tried everything in their arsenal. Different medications, various combinations, but my body refused to respond. It was as if something beyond medical science was taking control. Dr. Roberts later confessed that he'd never seen anything quite like it, a blood pressure that seemed to defy all standard treatments. Time ticked by with excruciating slowness. The monitors continued their ominous beeping, marking each moment my body moved closer to crisis. The nursing staff, many of whom I had trained myself, moved with increasing urgency. Their familiar faces, now etched with concern, floated in and out of my increasingly fuzzy vision. In the ER upstairs, Sarah was reaching a critical moment with young Tommy. His little heart had stopped, and she was performing CPR with the same determination that had defined her medical career. The parallels between mother and daughter fighting separate battles for life would later seem like divine poetry, but in that moment it was simply tragedy multiplied. The atmosphere in my room changed suddenly around 3:30 p.m. The medications that had been keeping my heart stable began to fail. My vision started to blur around the edges, and I felt an otherworldly calm descend upon me. Danny, always attuned to spiritual shifts, sensed it too. He moved closer to my bed, his Bible clutched tight in his trembling hands. "Charlotte," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "whatever happens, remember that God is with you. He's right here with us." His words seemed to float in the air, carrying a weight beyond their simple meaning. The room had taken on an almost sacred atmosphere, as if heaven itself was drawing near. The medical team's movements became more urgent. Blood pressures critical, someone called out. Heart rates becoming erratic, the familiar hospital sounds began to fade, replaced by something else, something I couldn't quite identify yet. It was like music, but unlike any earthly melody I'd ever heard. In those final moments before everything changed, I had a sudden crystal clear memory of the day we lost Matthew, our unborn son. It was also a March 15th, exactly 48 years ago. The symmetry of it struck me with profound significance. As my consciousness began to slip away, I felt a deep certainty that nothing about this day was coincidental. The last thing I remember was Danny's voice, strong yet breaking with emotion, reciting Psalm 23, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." The room erupted into chaos as my heart monitor began its ominous drone. "Code blue," someone shouted, and the crash team rushed in. What happened next would challenge everything we thought we knew about life, death, and the thin veil between heaven and earth. In the next 11 minutes, as my physical body lay lifeless on that hospital bed, my spirit would embark on a journey that would change not only my life but the lives of countless others who would hear my story. The moment my heart stopped, everything changed. Medical science would later record it as clinical death, a sterile term for an experience that was anything but clinical. The chaos of the hospital room seemed to slow down, like someone had pressed a cosmic pause button on the world. I found myself floating above my body, watching as the medical team fought to revive me. The scene below was both familiar and surreal. I'd participated in countless code blues during my nursing career, but never like this. Dr. Roberts was performing chest compressions, his normally composed face tight with concentration. Two nurses I'd trained years ago were working in perfect synchronization, one preparing the defibrillator while the other administered emergency medications. Danny stood in the corner, his lips moving in constant prayer, tears streaming down his face. I wanted to reach out to tell him I was okay, that everything was more than okay. The fear and grief etched on his face broke my heart, even in this strange state of being. From my elevated vantage point, I could see every detail with perfect clarity, the wedding ring on his finger catching the fluorescent light as he clutched his Bible, the small coffee stain on his shirt from breakfast, the gray at his temples that had grown more pronounced in recent years. The room was filled with a strange, beautiful light that nobody else seemed to notice. It wasn't the harsh glare of hospital fluorescence, but something softer, warmer, more alive. Colors became more vibrant, more real than I'd ever seen them. The white of the hospital walls glowed with an inner luminescence, and everything seemed to pulse with its own inner light. I could hear everything with supernatural clarity, the squeaking of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the rustle of medical equipment, the murmured prayers of the staff. But there was something else too, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was like music, but not any earthly melody I'd ever heard. It reminded me of the hymns we sang in church, but infinitely more beautiful, more pure. The most extraordinary thing was the complete absence of fear. Throughout my life, I'd had the normal human fears about death, despite my strong faith. But in this moment, suspended between worlds, I felt only peace and an overwhelming sense of love. The physical pain that had gripped me earlier was gone, replaced by a profound well-being that defied description. I watched as they shocked my body once, twice, 3 times. With each attempt, I felt a slight tug, like a gentle reminder of my connection to the physical world below. But something stronger was pulling me upward, drawing me toward that increasingly brilliant light. The hospital room began to fade around the edges, like a photograph slowly dissolving. In that moment of transition, time seemed to lose all meaning. I was simultaneously aware of every second ticking by on the hospital clock and completely removed from earthly time. The medical team's movements appeared to slow until they almost stopped, frozen in a tableau of desperate effort to save my life. Then I heard it, a voice I'd never heard before, but somehow knew more intimately than my own. It wasn't audible in any physical sense, but it resonated through every part of my being. Charlotte had said, with such love that it brought tears to my spirit, "It's time." The ceiling of the hospital room seemed to dissolve, revealing a vision of indescribable beauty. A pathway of light stretched upward, not made of any physical substance, but pure, living radiance. The music I'd been hearing grew stronger, more complex, more beautiful, a harmony of countless voices and instruments blending in perfect praise. As I began to move upward, I had one last glimpse of the scene below. The monitor still showed a flat line. Dr. Roberts was calling out for another round of epinephrine, and Danny had fallen to his knees, his prayer now a whispered plea. I saw Sarah burst into the room, still in her surgical scrubs, her face a mask of shock and disbelief as she realized what was happening. The timing was profound. My daughter, who had just lost her young patient upstairs, arriving to find her mother on the brink of death. In that suspended moment, I understood that this was no coincidence. Every detail, every moment had been orchestrated with divine precision. The date, March 15th, the anniversary of losing Matthew, the parallel struggles of mother and daughter fighting to save lives, the gathering of specific people in that room. All of it was part of a greater plan. As I ascended toward the light, I felt myself becoming more real, more alive than I'd ever been in my physical body. Each movement brought new awareness, new understanding. The boundaries that had defined my earthly existence, time, space, physical limitation, fell away like old clothes that no longer fit. The last thing I saw before the hospital room disappeared completely was a small detail that would later become significant: the clock on the wall showing 3:33 p.m. In that moment, suspended between heaven and earth, I didn't know that those 11 minutes would change not only my life but the lives of countless others. I didn't know that what I was about to experience would shake the foundations of faith for some and strengthen it for others. I only knew that I was heading home and that everything in my life had been preparation for what was to come. The light grew brighter, the music more beautiful, and I felt myself being drawn upward into a reality more vivid and true than anything I'd ever known. What happened next would challenge everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the eternal love that binds them together. As the hospital scene faded completely, I found myself moving through what I can only describe as a gateway of pure light. The transition was gentle but profound, like stepping from a black and white photograph into a world of colors that don't exist on Earth. The air itself seemed alive with music, not just heard but felt, seen, and somehow tasted, a symphony for all the senses and more. Two beings of light approached me. Their radiance should have been blinding, but my eyes, or whatever I was seeing with, now adjusted naturally. They were unmistakably angels, though nothing like the artistic representations I'd seen in churches. Their forms shifted between humanoid and pure light, and their presence emanated such love and welcome that I felt tears of joy, though I no longer had a physical body to cry with. "Welcome home, Charlotte," they communicated, not through words but through pure thought and feeling. Their greeting carried with it memories of every time I'd prayed, every moment of doubt and faith, every tear and smile throughout my life. They knew me completely, and their love was unconditional. The pathway before us opened into a vast expanse that defied earthly physics. Colors I had never seen before danced through the air, and what looked like flowers bloomed with light rather than pigment. The ground beneath us, though ground isn't quite the right word, seemed to respond to our presence, creating patterns of luminescent beauty with each step. The music I'd heard earlier grew more complex and beautiful. It wasn't coming from any particular direction, but seemed to emanate from everything around us. I recognized hints of familiar hymns woven into a far grander composition, ancient songs of praise transformed into their perfect, heavenly form. Every blade of grass, every particle of light joined in this eternal symphony. As we moved forward, I became aware of a presence so vast and loving that it defied comprehension. It wasn't localized like my angel guides, but was everywhere, in everything. I knew with a certainty beyond faith that I was experiencing the presence of God Himself. Every question I'd ever had about faith, every doubt, every moment of uncertainty dissolved in the light of this perfect love. The angels led me to what appeared to be a garden, though that word falls tragically short of describing what I saw. Every plant, every flower was alive with consciousness, swaying in worship to their Creator. The colors were more vivid than anything on earth, and each bloom seemed to contain worlds within worlds of beauty. The air was filled with the sweetest fragrance, like every flower I'd ever smelled distilled into their pure, perfect essence. Time moved differently here. I could sense events on earth continuing, the medical team working on my body, Danny praying, Sarah's grief, but they felt distant, like echoes from another realm. In this place, past, present, and future seemed to exist simultaneously, yet perfectly ordered by divine purpose. The angels communicated that this was only the threshold of heaven, a preparation for what was to come. They explained that every soul's journey here was unique, tailored to their capacity to comprehend glory. What I was experiencing was shaped by my earthly understanding, translated into forms I could grasp, though the reality was far more magnificent than any human mind could fully comprehend. As we moved deeper into this realm, I began to sense other presences, countless souls in worship, their joy and peace radiating like stars. Though I couldn't see them clearly yet, I knew some were familiar loved ones who had gone before me. The anticipation of reunion brought a new wave of joy, but the angels gently indicated that there was more to experience first. They showed me what looked like a river, though it flowed with pure light rather than water. Its surface reflected not just images but truth itself, every moment of my life viewed through the lens of divine purpose. I saw how seemingly random events had been intricately connected, how every trial had strengthened my faith, how every joy had been a gift of grace. The air grew thicker with glory, and I sensed we were approaching something of profound importance. The angels' light grew brighter, and the music swelled to new heights of beauty. They were preparing me for what was to come, encounters that would change not just my understanding of heaven, but of life itself. In that moment, suspended in perfect peace, I understood that every second of my earthly life had been preparation for this. My nursing career, my faith journey, even my losses, especially my losses, had been shaping me for what I was about to experience. The love that surrounded me was not just comforting, it was transformative, revealing the true nature of reality itself. The angels paused, indicating we had reached a threshold of sorts. Beyond this point lay experiences so sacred, so profound, that they would forever change how I understood love, life, and the divine purpose behind every human story. What waited ahead would answer questions I'd carried for 48 years, since the day we lost Matthew, and revealed truths that would touch countless lives when I returned to share them. As we prepared to move forward, I felt a surge of divine love so powerful it would have overwhelmed my earthly body. Here in this form I could receive it fully, understanding at last what the Apostle Paul meant when he wrote about things too wonderful for human words to express. What happened next would reveal mysteries that would shake the foundations of everything I thought I knew about heaven, earth, and the eternal love that binds them together. Beyond the threshold, the scene transformed into what appeared to be a vast gathering place. The light, somehow even more brilliant than before, revealed familiar faces that took my breath away if I'd still had breath to take. There, radiating joy and perfect health, stood my parents, looking exactly as I remembered them in their prime, but somehow more real, more alive than they'd ever been on earth. My father, who had passed 20 years ago after a long battle with cancer, now stood tall and strong, his face free from pain and filled with pure joy. My mother, who had left us 5 years after him, looked radiant with the same warm smile that had comforted me throughout my childhood. They appeared to be in their 30s, yet I recognized them instantly. They were themselves, but perfected the people they were always meant to be. "Charlotte, our precious daughter," they said in unison, their voices carrying both the familiar warmth I remembered and a new, heavenly resonance. They didn't walk to embrace me, rather, their love enveloped me like a tangible force. Every moment of love we'd shared on earth seemed to pale in comparison to this complete, perfect connection. Behind them stood a gathering of familiar faces, my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and friends who had passed before me. Each one was instantly recognizable, yet transformed by heaven's glory. My grandmother, who had suffered from severe arthritis, moved with graceful ease. My Uncle James, who had lost his battle with heart disease, radiated perfect health and vitality. But what struck me most was how they all moved in perfect harmony with the eternal music that filled this realm. Their movements weren't just coordinated, they were part of the very fabric of heaven's ongoing worship. Every gesture, every smile, every moment of recognition was part of this grand symphony of praise. As I absorbed the joy of these reunions, I became aware of a deeper truth being revealed. These weren't just memories or echoes of the people I'd known, they were more real, more truly themselves than they'd ever been on earth. Everything that had made them unique, every gift and talent, every aspect of their personality was now perfected and fulfilled in Christ. The angels who had guided me explained that in heaven relationships don't end, they are transformed and elevated. The love we share on earth is just a shadow of the perfect love we experience here. Every relationship is purified, every connection deepened, all in the light of God's perfect love. My mother touched what would have been my hand, and in that contact I experienced every moment we'd ever shared together, every laugh, every tear, every prayer, but now I saw them from heaven's perspective. I understood how each moment had been guided by divine purpose, even the painful ones. The day she passed away, which had seemed so tragic on earth, I now saw as a beautiful homecoming. As we communed, they shared wisdom about heaven that transcended earthly understanding. Time here wasn't linear, it moved according to God's perfect purpose. What felt like moments could contain eternities of meaning, and what seemed like ages could pass in the blink of an eye. Everything was oriented around worship and the perfect expression of God's love. They showed me how they had watched over our family since their passing, not in the limited way we sometimes imagine on earth, but in perfect accordance with God's will. They had seen Sarah's struggles and triumphs, Danny's faithful ministry, and my own journey of faith. Every prayer we'd offered had been heard, every tear noted, every joy celebrated in heaven's courts. The understanding they shared wasn't communicated in mere words, it was imparted directly, spirit to spirit. Truths that would have taken hours to explain on earth were understood in instances of perfect clarity. I learned how heaven wasn't just a place, but a state of being perfect communion with God and with each other. As this revelation continued, I sensed there was still more to come. My parents and the others seemed to know this, their joy tinged with anticipation for what I was about to experience. They were preparing me for an encounter that would answer the deepest questions of my heart, questions that had haunted me for 48 years. The music shifted, taking on a new tone that seemed to draw us all deeper into worship. The light around us intensified, and I felt myself being prepared for something even more profound. My family members stepped back, their faces glowing with knowledge of what was to come. They had been the first step in my heaven's journey, but they were not the last. The angels who had guided me reappeared, their light somehow both gentler and more intense than before. "There is someone else who has been waiting to meet you," they communicated. The love and joy that had filled me during these reunions now seemed like mere preparation for what was about to unfold. As they led me forward, I understood that every tear I'd cried, every prayer I'd prayed, every moment of faith and doubt had been leading to this next encounter. Heaven was about to reveal its most profound truth to me, a truth that would forever change how I understood God's love and His perfect plan. The angels led me to what seemed like a garden pavilion, though those earthly terms fall woefully short of describing its glory. As we approached, I saw a small figure that made my heart, or whatever I was experiencing emotions with, now stop. There, playing among flowers that sang with light, was a young child who looked to be about 3 years old. I knew him instantly with a certainty that transcended physical recognition. This was Matthew, our son, the baby we had lost 48 years ago at 5.5 months of pregnancy. He turned to me with a smile that contained all the love and joy heaven could hold. He didn't look like a baby or a fetus. He had grown here in heaven, though not in the same way children grow on earth. "Mommy," he said, in a voice that sounded like pure music. The word carried with it all the love of 48 years, all the moments we might have shared on earth, transformed and perfected in heaven's reality. He ran to me, and as we embraced, I experienced every moment of his existence, both the brief time he had spent in my womb and his eternal life here in heaven. Through this divine connection, I understood that he had never really been lost. While we had mourned on earth, he had been growing, learning, and living in the direct presence of God's love. Every tear I had shed for him had been collected, every prayer heard, every moment of grief transformed into something beautiful in heaven's economy. As we communed, Matthew showed me his life in heaven. He had been assigned angel teachers who had educated him in the ways of eternity. He had grown in wisdom and knowledge, though differently than earthly children. Time here worked according to God's perfect plan, not our linear understanding. In some ways he was still my baby, in others he had wisdom that transcended earthly age. Then the atmosphere shifted, and an even greater presence filled our space. The light, already brilliant, intensified to a degree that would have been impossible to bear with physical eyes. I knew with every fiber of my being that I was in the presence of God Himself. His love was overwhelming, yet perfectly calibrated to what I could receive. "My daughter," his voice resonated through every part of my being, "you have carried questions in your heart. Since the day Matthew came home to me, each word was filled with perfect understanding and love." He showed me how Matthew's brief life on earth and his eternal life in heaven were part of a greater purpose, one that had touched countless lives through our ministry to other grieving parents. But then God revealed something more, a truth so profound it would forever change how I understood His plan. He showed me how heaven and earth were connected in ways I had never imagined. Every prayer, every act of love, every moment of faith created ripples that affected both realms. The worship in heaven and the prayers of saints on earth were part of the same eternal symphony. He then showed me a vision of what was happening on earth at that very moment. I saw Sarah in the hospital chapel, wrestling with the loss of her young patient and the critical condition of her mother. I saw Danny still praying by my physical body, his faith unwavering despite his fear. I saw our church members gathered in prayer, their petitions rising like incense to heaven's throne. But then God revealed something that shook me to my core. He showed me the little boy Sarah had tried to save Tommy Matthews. In heaven's light, I saw how his story connected to ours in ways we couldn't have understood on earth. His brief life and passing were part of a larger tapestry of divine purpose, one that would bring healing and hope to many. The presence of God grew even more intense, and he began to share wisdom about life, death, and eternity that transcended human understanding. He showed me how every moment of my life, my nursing career, my faith journey, even my current medical crisis, had been preparation for what was to come. Nothing had been wasted. Every experience had purpose. Then, with infinite tenderness, God presented me with a choice. He showed me two paths. I could stay in heaven in this perfect communion with him, with Matthew and all my loved ones, or I could return to earth with a message of hope and truth that would transform countless lives. The choice was real. My free will, given by God, was honored even here in heaven. As I contemplated this decision, Matthew squeezed my hand. Somehow I knew he understood the magnitude of this moment. The love we shared wasn't dependent on my choice. It was eternal, transcending the boundaries between heaven and earth. Through God's perfect love, I understood that choosing to return wouldn't mean leaving Matthew behind. It would mean carrying a piece of heaven's reality back to earth. The angels who had guided me stood nearby, their light pulsing with divine purpose. They knew, as I was beginning to understand, that every moment of this experience was about more than just my own journey. It was about God's larger plan to bring hope and healing to a broken world through the testimony of those who had glimpsed heaven's reality. As I stood there, suspended in this moment of divine decision, I felt the weight of both heaven's glory and earth's need. What happened next would not only determine my own path, but would impact the lives of countless others who needed to know the truth about God's love and heaven's reality. The weight of the decision before me was both heavy and light, heavy with significance, yet lightened by the perfect peace that permeated heaven's realm. God's presence enveloped me as he showed me what my choice would mean, not just for me, but for countless others whose lives would be touched by my testimony. First, he revealed what staying in heaven would mean. I saw myself completely transformed, free from all earthly limitations, joining the eternal worship with Matthew, my parents, and all the saints who had gone before. The joy and peace I would experience were beyond description. Perfect communion with God, unending discovery of his glory, and eternal fellowship with loved ones. Then he showed me what returning would mean. I saw Danny, his faith strengthened by my experience, leading countless others to a deeper understanding of God's love. I saw Sarah, her medical practice transformed by a new understanding of the thin veil between life and death. I saw grieving parents finding hope through my story, skeptics considering faith anew, and people making eternal decisions based on the testimony I would share. But then God revealed something unexpected, a vision of the young boy Sarah couldn't save, Tommy Matthews. I saw his family broken by grief, questioning their faith, desperate for answers. In this divine moment, I understood that my experience wasn't just about my family or my testimony. It was also about bringing healing to their shattered hearts. The vision expanded, showing me hospital rooms where I would sit with dying patients, now able to speak with authority about what awaited them. I saw church gatherings where my testimony would break through walls of doubt and fear. I saw my story reaching people I would never meet, bringing hope to places I would never go. Matthew, still holding my hand, shared his perfect understanding of the moment. "Mommy," he communicated, "your love for me has helped so many others already. Think how many more could be helped if you shared what you've seen here." His wisdom, mature beyond earthly years, carried the weight of heaven's perspective. God then showed me the cost of returning. I would feel the full weight of earthly pain again, physical discomfort, emotional struggles, the limitations of mortal life. The perfect clarity I now experienced would be muted, filtered through human consciousness. I would have to find words for things that transcended language, trying to explain colors to those who had only seen shadows. But he also showed me the beauty in this limitation. My very struggle to express the inexpressible would make my testimony more powerful, more relatable to those still bound by earthly understanding. My human frailty would become a bridge, helping others connect with divine truth through my imperfect but authentic witness. The angels who had guided me shared their perspective, showing me how heaven rejoices when even one soul turns toward God's love. They helped me understand that my return would create ripples of divine influence, touching lives in ways I couldn't imagine. Each person who found hope through my story would create their own ripples, spreading heaven's truth in ever-widening circles. Then God revealed something that brought everything into focus. He showed me how my experience was connected to the very nature of Christ's sacrifice. Just as Jesus chose to leave heaven's glory to bring hope to humanity, I was being offered the chance to carry a piece of heaven's reality back to earth. Though on an infinitely smaller scale, my choice echoed that divine pattern of sacrifice for the sake of others. The vision continued, showing me specific moments yet to come: a mother who had lost her child finding hope through my story, a dying patient finding peace in their final hours, a skeptical doctor reconsidering their understanding of life and death. Each scene carried the weight of eternal significance. My parents and other heavenly loved ones gathered around, their presence radiating support and understanding. They showed me how they would continue their heavenly work, supporting my earthly ministry through prayer and divine partnership. The distance from them would be physical, only our spiritual connection would remain unbroken. The music of heaven swelled, and in its harmony I heard the prayers rising from earth: Danny's faithful petitions, Sarah's desperate pleas, the collective prayers of our church family. These earthly prayers and heaven's worship were part of the same divine symphony, and I was being offered the chance to become a bridge between these two realities. As I stood there, suspended in this moment of decision, I felt the full weight of God's love, not pushing me in either direction, but supporting me in perfect freedom to choose. Matthew's hand in mine reminded me of the reality of heaven's joy, while the visions of lives that could be changed pulled at my heart with divine purpose. The choice before me was clear, yet profound: remain in this perfect communion or return as a witness to its reality. Either choice would serve God's purpose, this much I understood. But as the moment of decision approached, I felt a deeper understanding of why God was allowing me this glimpse of heaven, this chance to choose. It wasn't just about me, or even about my family. It was about His greater purpose of bringing hope and healing to a broken world. Just then, God's presence intensified, and He began to show me visions of what was to come, glimpses of purpose so profound they took my breath away. The scenes unfolded like living paintings, each one more vivid than any earthly experience. First, I saw Danny in our church, sharing my testimony with tears streaming down his face. The congregation was spellbound as he described how his wife had seen heaven and returned. In their faces I saw something change, not just emotion, but a fundamental shift in how they understood life, death, and God's love. The wall between faith and sight seemed to thin as they listened. Then I saw Sarah in her hospital, standing beside a patient's bed. She was different, her clinical expertise now beautifully blended with a deeper understanding of life's spiritual dimension. I watched her comfort a dying patient with words that carried the weight of her mother's experience. The fear in her patient's eyes melted away, replaced by peace that transcended medical explanation. The vision shifted to a grieving mother. I recognized her as Tommy Matthews' mother. She sat in our church's prayer room, clutching a book. With a start, I realized it was a book of my testimony. As she read about my reunion with Matthew in heaven, her own grief began to transform. The knowledge that her son was not just gone but alive and growing in heaven brought healing tears to her eyes. God showed me how my experience would ripple out beyond our community. I saw myself speaking in churches across the country, each testimony breaking down barriers between heaven and earth in people's understanding. I saw books translated into different languages, carrying this message of hope to places I would never visit personally. But then the vision deepened, showing me something even more profound. I saw people I would never meet being touched by this story: a businessman questioning his materialistic lifestyle after reading about heaven's reality, a scientist beginning to see beyond the physical realm, a teenager choosing faith over despair after learning about God's eternal love. The scenes continued to unfold: hospital chaplains using my testimony to comfort the dying, grief counselors sharing it with bereaved parents, pastors incorporating these heavenly truths into their teaching. Each instance showed how this brief glimpse of heaven could help bridge the gap between earthly pain and eternal hope. Most moving were the visions of families gathered around dinner tables, discussing what my experience revealed about God's love and heaven's reality. I saw how these conversations would open hearts, heal relationships, and draw people closer to God's truth. The ripple effect seemed endless, each life touched becoming a new point of light in the darkness. Then God revealed something that humbled me completely. He showed me how my story would be just one thread in a larger tapestry He was weaving. Other people's testimonies of heaven, near-death experiences, and divine encounters would work together, each contributing to a greater understanding of spiritual reality in an increasingly skeptical world. I saw how my experience with Matthew would especially resonate with parents who had lost children. The knowledge that children continue to grow and learn in heaven, surrounded by perfect love, would bring healing to countless broken hearts. This truth would help transform grief from a crushing weight to a temporary separation softened by hope. The vision expanded to show me specific moments that would unfold in the years to come: a Christmas service where an entire family would come to faith after hearing about heaven's reality, a hospital room where a dying child would face eternity without fear, a marriage saved because both partners gained an eternal perspective through this testimony. But God didn't shield me from seeing the challenges that would come with sharing this story. I saw the skeptics who would dismiss it, the critics who would try to explain it away, the difficulties of putting heavenly experiences into earthly words. Yet even in showing me these challenges, God revealed how they would serve His purpose, sparking discussions that would lead people to seek truth for themselves. The music of heaven swelled to new heights as these visions continued, and I understood that every life touched by this testimony would add its own unique note to heaven's eternal symphony. Each heart turned toward hope, each soul awakened to eternal reality, would create new harmonies in this divine orchestration. Matthew squeezed my hand again, and in that touch I felt his complete understanding of what these visions meant. His presence reminded me that heaven's reality wasn't just something I had seen, it was something I had experienced in the most personal way possible through our reunion. As the visions began to fade, I understood that what I had witnessed wasn't just a preview of possible events, it was a revelation of divine purpose. Every detail of my experience, from the timing of my crisis to the specific truths I had been shown, was part of God's perfect plan to bring hope and healing to a broken world. The choice before me now carried even greater weight, illuminated by the knowledge of what was at stake. These weren't just possible futures, they were divine opportunities, chances to help bridge the gap between heaven and earth in ways that could transform countless lives. The heavenly visions faded, and I felt myself being drawn to another realm, a place so different from the glory I had just witnessed that the contrast alone was devastating. The angels who had guided me remained close, their light providing protection as we approached what I knew must be the edges of hell. The first thing that struck me was the absence, not just an absence of light, but an absence of everything good. The music that had filled heaven with constant praise was gone, replaced by a silence so deep it seemed to scream. The colors that had danced with divine life were swallowed by shadows that moved with terrible purpose. "You must see this too," the angels communicated, their presence strengthening me for what was to come. "For the testimony to be complete, you must understand both realities." Their light seemed to curve around the darkness, creating a path that would allow me to witness without being consumed. The smell hit me first, not just the physical stench of decay, but the spiritual rot of souls who had rejected love itself. It was the opposite of heaven's perfect fragrance, an anti-glory that made my spirit recoil. Through divine protection, I could perceive these horrors without being overwhelmed by them. I saw souls trapped in the consequences of their own choices. Their isolation wasn't imposed by God, but self-created, the natural result of lives spent turning away from love and truth. Each one was surrounded by thick walls of pride, bitterness, and unrepentance that had hardened into eternal prisons. Most devastating were the medical professionals I recognized, doctors and nurses who had used their positions to harm rather than heal. I saw how their betrayal of their calling had created deeper layers of separation from God's love. Their knowledge of what they had done became their torment, amplified by the understanding of how many lives they had damaged. The angels showed me how each soul here had received countless opportunities to choose differently. I saw divine invitations that had been rejected, prayers of loved ones that had gone unheeded, moments of truth that had been denied. None were here by accident or divine cruelty. Each had persistently chosen this separation from God's love. What broke my heart most was seeing how unnecessary this suffering was. In heaven, I had experienced the infinite depth of God's love and forgiveness. These souls hadn't been condemned by God, they had condemned themselves by refusing to accept love, forgiveness, and truth. Their prison walls were built from their own choices, brick by brick. Through divine wisdom, I understood that this vision of hell wasn't meant to terrorize but to awaken. God was showing me this reality not to frighten people into faith, but to help them understand the natural consequences of persistently rejecting love. This understanding would become a crucial part of my testimony. The air grew thicker with despair as we went deeper. I saw souls who had once sat in church pews, who had known the truth but had chosen to live lies. Their torment was deepened by the knowledge of what they had rejected. Some had even used religion itself as a weapon, causing others to stumble away from faith. Most painful was witnessing those who had influenced others toward destruction. Their suffering was multiplied by seeing the ripple effects of their choices, how their actions had led others away from truth and love. Each soul they had helped turn from God added new layers to their self-imposed torment. Yet even here, in this place of ultimate separation, I could sense God's heartbreak. This wasn't His desire for any of His creatures. I understood with perfect clarity that hell existed not because of God's wrath, but because of His respect for human free will. Love cannot be forced, it must be chosen. As we prepared to leave this dark realm, the angels showed me one final truth. Every soul I had seen had something in common. They had all believed there would be time later to change, to repent, to choose differently. They had postponed their choices until time itself had run out. This vision of hell's reality would become an essential part of my testimony, not as a threat, but as an urgent reminder of the importance of our choices. Each decision to accept or reject love, truth, and forgiveness carries eternal weight. The time to choose is always now. As we ascended from this place of darkness, I carried with me a deeper understanding of both God's perfect love and the tragic consequences of rejecting it. This knowledge would add gravity and urgency to the message I would be called to share. As we returned from the vision of hell, the weight of what I had witnessed pressed heavily upon my spirit. The contrast between heaven's glory and hell's desolation crystallized the magnitude of the choice before me. Staying in heaven meant remaining in perfect joy. Returning meant carrying the burden of both visions, the exquisite beauty of paradise and the devastating reality of hell. The hardest part was facing Matthew again, knowing what my choice might be. He stood there, perfect in heaven's light, his presence embodying everything I would have to leave behind. 48 years of longing for him had been satisfied in these moments of reunion. The thought of being separated again, even temporarily, felt like a physical pain, if pain could exist in this spiritual realm. The choice must be yours, the angels communicated, their light pulsing with compassion. They showed me what returning would mean: the physical agony of re-entering my broken body, the frustration of trying to describe the indescribable, the skepticism I would face, the emotional toll of carrying such weighty truth in a world often resistant to it. My parents stepped forward, their faces reflecting perfect understanding. They showed me how my return would mean not only leaving them and Matthew, but also carrying the responsibility of their message to our family. I would have to tell their grandchildren about seeing them, trying to convey the reality of their continued existence and love in ways that earthly words could barely capture. Then God revealed the deeper costs. I saw myself in future moments of doubt and darkness when the memory of heaven's clarity would make earth's shadows harder to bear. I saw nights when I would wake up crying, longing for the perfect communion I had experienced here. I saw moments when my testimony would be mocked, my experience dismissed, my sincerity questioned. The vision shifted to show me Sarah's struggle. If I returned, I would have to watch her wrestle with the loss of her young patient, while trying to reconcile it with my experience of heaven. I saw her professional reputation challenged as she began incorporating spiritual insights into her medical practice. My testimony would complicate her life in ways I hadn't anticipated. Danny's face appeared in the vision. I saw the weight my experience would add to his ministry. While my testimony would strengthen many people's faith, it would also bring increased scrutiny to our lives. Every action, every word would be examined through the lens of someone who claimed to have seen heaven. The pressure would be immense. God showed me the physical challenges I would face. My body had been through trauma, and recovery would be long and difficult. The contrast between my current spiritual freedom and the limitations of earthly existence would be stark. Simple tasks would become monuments to patience and perseverance. The hardest visions to bear were the ones showing moments with Matthew watching other mothers with their 3-year-old sons, celebrating birthdays he would never have on earth, facing the anniversary of his loss with new layers of understanding. Knowledge of his heavenly life would bring comfort, but it would also sharpen the awareness of all we had missed sharing on earth. The angels revealed how my relationships would change. Some friends would withdraw, uncomfortable with the depth of spiritual experience I would carry. Others would put me on a pedestal, creating distance of a different kind. The simple fellowship I had enjoyed before would be transformed by the weight of my testimony. Even my role in the church would carry new burdens. People would look to me for answers I couldn't always give, expect miracles I couldn't perform, seek certainty I couldn't provide. The responsibility of carrying heaven's truth would sometimes feel overwhelming. Yet in showing me these costs, God also revealed their purpose. Each challenge would authenticate my testimony in ways that perfect ease never could. The very difficulties of returning would become evidence of the truth I carried. Who would choose such struggles if their experience wasn't real? As these revelations of personal cost unfolded, Matthew squeezed my hand one more time. His touch carried perfect understanding of the sacrifice being contemplated. In that gesture, I felt God's own heart, the love that chooses to bear pain for the sake of others' salvation. The weight of these costs settled upon my spirit, not to discourage but to prepare. If I chose to return, I would need to understand fully what that choice entailed. This wasn't just about sharing a beautiful experience, it was about accepting a mission that would require everything I had to give. The moment of my decision arrived with perfect clarity. Looking at Matthew one last time, seeing the love and understanding in his eyes, I knew what I had to do. The choice to return wasn't just about leaving heaven, it was about bringing a piece of heaven back to earth. "I love you, Mommy," Matthew said, his voice carrying the music of eternity. "We'll be together again." His words weren't a goodbye, but a promise, filled with heaven's certainty. My parents stepped forward, enveloping me in one last embrace that contained all the love we had ever shared, purified and perfected by heaven's glory. The return journey began gradually, like slowly descending through layers of reality. The brilliant light that had surrounded me began to dim, not because it was fading, but because my spirit was transitioning back to earthly perception. The heavenly music became fainter, though I could still feel its echoes in my soul. As I descended, God gave me one final gift, a moment of perfect understanding. I saw how my 11 minutes in heaven would ripple through time, touching lives in ways I couldn't imagine. Every tear I had cried for Matthew, every prayer I had offered in confusion, every moment of doubt and faith, all of it had been preparation for this testimony. The angels accompanied me until the boundary between heaven and earth. Remember, they communicated, "You carry heaven's reality now. Even when you can't see us, we are nearer than you think." Their light began to fade from my vision, though I could still feel their presence surrounding me. The transition back to my physical body was the most difficult part of the journey. After experiencing the freedom of spiritual existence, returning to flesh and bone felt like putting on heavy, wet clothing. Each sensation returned slowly, first the awareness of the hospital room, then the sound of machines, and finally the feeling of my physical form. The first physical sensation was pain, not the searing crisis that had sent me into cardiac arrest, but the deep ache of a body that had been through trauma. I could feel the aftermath of the CPR compressions, the soreness in my chest, the general weakness of my limbs. Every cell seemed to protest this return to earthly limitations. I became aware of voices around me, Danny's prayers, Sarah's quiet sobs, the medical team's urgent communications. They sounded distant at first, like they were coming through water, but gradually became clearer. The hospital room's harsh fluorescent lights penetrated my closed eyelids, a pale imitation of heaven's radiance. The first breath was the hardest, like learning to breathe all over again. My lungs burned as they expanded, and I heard the monitors register the change in my vital signs. The medical team's voices became more excited, though I still couldn't make out their exact words. My heart resumed its earthly rhythm, each beat a reminder of my return to physical life. Opening my eyes required immense effort. The first thing I saw was Danny's face, tears streaming down his cheeks as he realized I was returning. Sarah stood beside him, her doctor's training warring with her daughter's emotions as she watched my vital signs stabilize. The clock on the wall showed 3:44 p.m., Exactly 11 minutes had passed. My first attempt to speak failed. My throat was too dry, my muscles too weak, but I managed to squeeze Danny's hand, trying to convey through that simple touch all that I had experienced. The love I had felt in heaven still flowed through me, though now filtered through physical limitations. The room erupted in activity as the medical team began their assessments. Questions were asked, tests were run, but I was still partially in both worlds, aware of my physical surroundings, yet still holding the memory of heaven's reality. Sarah's professional demeanor cracked as she leaned down to kiss my forehead, her tears mixing with my own. Through the fog of physical recovery, one thing remained crystal clear: the purpose for which I had returned. The message I carried wasn't just my story, it was a testament to God's love, heaven's reality, and the thin veil between our world and the next. As consciousness fully returned, I knew my real journey, the journey of sharing heaven's truth, was just beginning. In the days that followed my return, the full purpose of my experience began to unfold like a divine tapestry. The first revelation came when Sarah finally shared what had happened in her air, or while I was experiencing heaven. The 3-year-old boy she couldn't save, Tommy Matthews, had passed away at exactly 3:33 p.m., the same moment I had entered heaven's realm. The connection became even clearer when Tommy's parents visited me in the hospital. His mother, Elizabeth, sat beside my bed, grief etched deep in her face. As I shared about seeing children in heaven, their continued growth, their perfect joy, their ongoing purpose, something in her expression began to change. When I described how Matthew had shown me his role in welcoming other children, she wept, but these were different tears than before. Understanding dawned as I realized how God had orchestrated every detail. My near-death experience hadn't just been about my reunion with Matthew or my glimpse of heaven, it was about bringing hope to this grieving family in their darkest hour. The timing of everything, down to the minute, showed a divine precision that left no room for coincidence. Sarah's perspective on death and dying transformed completely. The combination of losing her young patient and nearly losing her mother, all while I experienced heaven's reality, reshaped her approach to medicine. She began to see her role not just as saving lives, but as helping people transition between worlds when healing wasn't possible. Her medical colleagues noticed the change, a new depth of compassion, a quiet certainty when speaking with terminal patients. Danny's ministry took on new dimensions as well. His sermons, always rooted in faith, now carried the weight of first-hand testimony through his wife's experience. When he spoke about heaven, his words had a different resonance, touched by the reality of what I had witnessed. Our church saw an unprecedented awakening as people began to understand eternity in more tangible ways. The most profound revelation came when I learned about the others who had been praying in the hospital chapel during my 11 minutes in heaven. Among them was a young nurse considering suicide after losing a patient. She had slipped into the chapel, planning to end her life after her shift, when she overheard people praying for the nurse who had seen heaven. That nurse later told me how hearing about my experience had given her the hope to keep living. God showed me how my testimony would reach beyond our immediate community. Speaking invitations began arriving from churches across the country. Each time I shared my story, I watched understanding dawn in people's eyes, not just about heaven's reality, but about God's intimate involvement in our lives. Every detail of my experience seemed to answer specific questions in listeners' hearts. The impact on the medical community was unexpected. Doctors and nurses who had previously dismissed near-death experiences began asking questions, opening themselves to possibilities beyond their medical training. Sarah organized a series of discussions at the hospital about spirituality and medicine, creating a space for healthcare providers to explore the intersection of faith and science. But the deepest purpose revealed itself in the quiet moments, private conversations with grieving parents, letters from people facing death without fear after hearing my story. Transformations in the lives of those who realized heaven's reality changed everything about how they lived on earth. Each interaction confirmed that my choice to return had been part of God's greater plan. Matthew's role in all this became clearer too. His brief life and our reunion in heaven had created a bridge of understanding for others separated from their loved ones. Parents who had lost children found particular comfort in knowing that their little ones continued to grow and thrive in heaven's perfect care. The timing of my experience, exactly 48 years after losing Matthew, during the same hour Sarah lost her young patient, spoke to God's perfect orchestration. Every detail served a purpose, encouraging the grieving, challenging the skeptical, comforting the dying, and awakening the living to heaven's reality. This understanding of purpose didn't come all at once, but unfolded gradually, like a flower opening its petals to the sun. Each new revelation showed another facet of God's perfect plan, another way that 11 minutes in heaven could bring light to those walking through Earth's darkest valleys. 5 years have passed since my journey to heaven, and the transformations in both my life and the lives of others continue to unfold in ways that can only be described as miraculous. The memory of those 11 minutes remains as vivid as ever, not fading like a dream, but standing as a solid foundation that has reshaped everything about how I live and understand reality. The most immediate change was in my approach to nursing. After recovering, I returned to work not just as a healthcare provider, but as someone who had experienced the ultimate transition. My colleagues noticed the difference. There was a depth to my patient care that transcended medical training. Terminal patients particularly sensed this change, often telling me they could see heaven's peace in my eyes when I spoke to them. Sarah's medical practice underwent an equally profound transformation. The combination of nearly losing her mother and losing young Tommy Matthews while I experienced heaven changed her entire approach to emergency medicine. She began pioneering a new approach to critical care that honored both the physical and spiritual needs of patients and their families. Her research on the intersection of medical care and spiritual experience has since been published in several medical journals. Danny's ministry exploded with new life. Our small church could no longer contain the crowds that came to hear about heaven's reality, but more important than the numbers was the depth of transformation in people's lives. Marriages were healed as couples began viewing their relationships through an eternal lens. People released long-held bitterness as they understood the temporary nature of earthly struggles compared to heaven's eternal reality. The Matthews family became an integral part of our story. Elizabeth Matthews, Tommy's mother, joined me in speaking to grieving parents. Her testimony of finding hope through my experience, combined with my account of heaven's reality for children, created a powerful message of healing. Together, we established the Heaven's Hope Foundation, supporting families who have lost children and funding research into near-death experiences. My relationship with death completely transformed. Having experienced the reality of heaven, I no longer see death as an ending, but as a transition. This understanding has made me a sought-after counselor for terminal patients and their families. Hospitals across the country began inviting me to train their staff in providing spiritual support alongside medical care. The ripple effects reached far beyond our local community. The book about my experience, 11 Minutes in Heaven, has been translated into 42 languages. But more meaningful than the sales are the letters I receive daily from readers whose lives have been transformed by understanding heaven's reality. People facing death write about finding peace. Grieving families share stories of hope renewed. Skeptics tell of faith awakened. Perhaps the most profound transformation has been in how I view time itself. Knowing the reality of eternity has changed how I value each earthly moment. Every conversation carries the weight of eternal significance. Every relationship is seen through the lens of heaven's perfect love. Even mundane tasks take on new meaning when viewed as part of God's eternal purpose. My connection with Matthew, though physically separated again, has grown deeper in an unexpected way. While I miss his physical presence, our brief reunion in heaven gave me a certainty about his continued existence that transcends grief. This has enabled me to help countless other parents transform their own grief into hope. The medical community's response has been particularly remarkable. What began with Sarah's changed approach has grown into a movement of healthcare providers seeking to better understand the spiritual aspects of patient care. Regular conferences now bring together doctors, nurses, chaplains, and near-death experience survivors to explore how to better serve patients facing life's final transition. Our church has become a beacon of hope for people struggling with questions about death and eternity. The grief support group Danny and I lead has expanded into a full-scale ministry, offering hope and healing to people from all faiths and backgrounds. The testimonies of lives transformed through this ministry continue to multiply. Most significantly, my understanding of God's love has been transformed. Experiencing His presence in heaven, seeing His perfect plan unfold in the timing and details of my journey, has given me an unshakable certainty about His intimate involvement in our lives. This certainty flows through everything I do and say, touching others with heaven's reality in ways words alone never could. As I approach the 10th anniversary of my heavenly journey, I often reflect on the legacy this experience has created. Not just my personal legacy, but the continuing impact of heaven's reality in countless lives. The ripples continue to spread, touching people in places I never imagined reaching. The Heaven's Hope Foundation, which began as a small support group for grieving parents, has grown into an international organization. We've established centers in 12 countries, providing comfort and understanding to families facing loss. Elizabeth Matthews, Tommy's mother, now leads our international outreach, sharing how the connection between her son's passing and my heavenly experience revealed God's perfect timing and care. Sarah's medical research has revolutionized how hospitals approach end-of-life care. Her program, combining medical excellence with spiritual understanding, has been adopted by major medical centers across the country. Young doctors and nurses now receive training in supporting patients and families through life's final transition, acknowledging both the physical and spiritual aspects of death. Danny's ministry has evolved into a powerful testament to heaven's reality. Our church hosts an annual conference called Heaven's Threshold, bringing together near-death experience survivors, medical professionals, grief counselors, and those seeking understanding about eternity. The impact extends far beyond religious boundaries, touching people of all faiths and backgrounds with heaven's truth. The most profound legacy, perhaps, is in the individual lives transformed. A terminal cancer patient finds peace after hearing about heaven's reality. A grieving widow discovers hope in understanding her husband's continued existence. A skeptical doctor encounters evidence of life beyond death. Each story adds another thread to the tapestry of testimony about heaven's truth. Matthew's legacy continues to grow in unexpected ways. The children's wing of our foundation bears his name, and through it, countless families have found healing in understanding how children continue to grow and thrive in heaven. His brief life and our reunion have become a bridge of hope for parents facing similar losses. My book has spawned study groups worldwide, where people gather to discuss heaven's reality and its implications for how we live on earth. These groups have become communities of support and understanding, where people can openly discuss their questions and experiences about life after death. The medical community's response has evolved from initial skepticism to earnest investigation. Research projects studying near-death experiences have received funding from major institutions, and the data continues to support what I witnessed, that consciousness extends beyond physical death, and that these experiences transform lives in measurable ways. Our work with the dying has created a new approach to transition care. Hospitals that have implemented our program report patients and families experiencing more peaceful deaths, reduced anxiety, and better grief outcomes. The combination of medical excellence and spiritual understanding has created a model for compassionate end-of-life care. The annual remembrance service we hold for children in heaven has become a powerful testament to hope. Families gather from across the country, finding comfort in shared understanding and the certainty of heaven's reality. The service combines memory and hope, acknowledging grief while celebrating the continuing life of loved ones in heaven. My grandchildren have grown up with a unique perspective on life and death. They speak of their Uncle Matthew as a real person, understanding that he continues to exist in heaven. Their natural acceptance of heaven's reality has influenced their friends and classmates, spreading understanding to a new generation. The legacy extends into education as well. Universities now offer courses examining near-death experiences from medical, psychological, and spiritual perspectives. Sarah regularly lectures at medical schools, helping future doctors understand the importance of honoring both the physical and spiritual needs of their patients. But perhaps the most meaningful legacy is the quiet one, the countless private conversations, the letters received, the moments of understanding that transform individual lives. Each person who finds hope through this testimony becomes a bearer of that hope to others, creating an ever-widening circle of impact. As I look toward the future, I see this legacy continuing to grow. Each new person who hears about heaven's reality becomes a potential ambassador of hope. The truth about heaven's existence and God's perfect love continues to transform lives, one story at a time. The greatest legacy, though, is the changed understanding of death itself. What was once seen as an ending is now understood as a transition. The fear that once surrounded death has been replaced by hope, grounded in the reality of heaven's existence and the perfect love that awaits us there. Your thoughts on this divine journey mean the world to us. If this story of hope and eternal love has touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Share this message of heaven's reality with your loved ones who might need comfort and hope. Your likes and comments create a community of support and understanding. Together we can spread the truth about God's perfect love and heaven's existence. Every subscription helps us reach more people with stories of faith, hope, and divine purpose. Let us know in the comments below how this testimony has impacted your life.